The sound of porcelain shattering against the imported Italian marble floor was deafening. But it wasn't the noise that rattled me. No, it was the silence that followed. An unbearable stillness that swallowed every ounce of air from the room, leaving us all struggling to breathe. It was as though the universe had held its breath. We stood there in that crushing void, each of us locked in the moment, paralyzed by the weight of what had just happened. And then it came, slow, deliberate, and haunting. The rhythmic sound of clapping. Slow, calculated applause, echoing in the vast, dimly lit room. It came from the head of the table. "That is how a mother teaches her son," the woman said, her voice dripping with cold satisfaction. It slithered into my veins, freezing me from the inside out. "Discipline is the highest form of love, Julian. She will thank you for it later," she continued. The words were sharp, like glass shattering in my chest. "My name is Flo Sterling. I'm 60 years old, and for 35 of those years, I've been a shark in the courtroom, a senior partner at one of San Francisco's most prestigious litigation firms. I've demolished corporate monopolies, brokered billion-dollar settlements, and stared down cold-blooded killers without a flicker of fear. I built my reputation on being untouchable, a fortress of logic, strategy, and law. But nothing, not a single case I've won or a single argument I've dominated, prepared me for what I saw that night. Nothing prepared me for the sight of my only daughter, Claire, crumpled on the cold marble floor of a dining room in Pacific Heights, her cheek blooming with the imprint of a red handprint, as her husband stood over her, and his mother applauded. This is not just a story about a bad marriage. This is the story of how the glossy veneer of wealth and privilege hides the deepest, most destructive rot. It's about how a single Sunday evening dinner unraveled a legacy of violence that had festered for generations. It's about how I had to stop being a lawyer and become a mother. How I learned that the most dangerous monsters don't lurk in dark alleyways. They sit at the heads of grand dining tables, in rooms drenched in wealth and power. But let me take you back to that evening. It was November 12th. The date is burned into my mind, not because it was just another night, but because it marked the 3rd anniversary of my husband Marcus's passing. Marcus had been a cardiologist, a man of infinite patience, warmth, and kindness, the complete opposite of the battlefield I'd been fighting in for decades. Since his death, the silence in our Victorian home in No Valley had grown heavy. It hung around us like a suffocating fog. Claire, my brilliant, artistic Claire, the architect who used to design skyscrapers with eyes full of starlight, had insisted I not spend the evening alone. "Come over, Mom," she had said over the phone, her voice stretched thin like a violin string ready to snap. "Julian's having his mother over. We'll make Dad's favorite roast. It'll be nice." I knew better. It was never nice at the Thorne residence. Julian Thorne was 31, a venture capitalist with a smile that could charm the skin off a snake. His eyes never quite warmed up, though. They were always cold, calculating. He was the golden boy of Silicon Valley, wealthy, handsome, and terrifyingly precise. But behind him was always Victoria Thorne, his mother. Victoria was a relic of old San Francisco money, a woman who wore her widowhood like a crown and played people like chess pieces. Her husband, Arthur, had died 20 years ago in a tragic fall from their penthouse terrace, a fall that was ruled an accident after a party. But as we all know, wealthy men don't just fall off balconies without someone noticing. When I arrived at their mansion at 7 o'clock that night, the rain was beating against the bay windows, wrapping the house in a cage of water. The air inside was brittle, tense. Every detail was in place, military precision. The table was set perfectly, the crystal glasses arranged just so, the silverware gleaming like mirrors. Claire was in the kitchen, and when I saw her, my heart sank. She looked diminished. That's the only word for it. My daughter, who used to light up a room with her laughter and her passion, now seemed to occupy less space. She moved with hesitation, like she wasn't sure of her own place in the world anymore. "You look tired, darling," I said, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched. It was microscopic, a reflex she tried to hide, but I saw it. I saw the terror in her eyes before she masked it with a fragile smile. "It's just work, Mom," she whispered. "The new project is demanding." Julian liked things to be perfect. The night went on, and the tension in the room grew thicker with every passing moment. Victoria spent the entire first course criticizing Claire's appearance, her hosting skills, her choice of napkins. She sliced the roast with surgical precision, finding fault with everything Claire did. "This roast is a bit dry, don't you think, Julian?" Victoria asked, her voice cutting through the tension. One would think that with all the time Claire spends at home now, she'd have mastered the art of oven temperatures. Claire's face tightened at the comment, but she said nothing. She just swallowed it like she'd learned to swallow everything else. I watched my daughter, the woman I'd raised to be strong, independent, break in front of me. It was heartbreaking, and it was happening right before my eyes. Before we continue, I'd like to ask for something from you. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video and listen till the end. I'd love to know which city you're listening from. This way I can see just how far my story has traveled. Just wait, there's more. You won't believe what happened next. How one small mistake set everything into motion, and how the forces of power, control, and cruelty collided in a way that would change everything. Stick with me, the twists are just beginning. The evening wore on, but the tension in the air only thickened. Claire had become a shell of herself, shrinking beneath the constant scrutiny. Every comment from Victoria was a jab, each one digging deeper into the fragile armor she had left. "Julian, darling, you know how Mother likes it," Victoria said in her high, condescending tone, her eyes never leaving her plate. "It's all about the details. If you can't manage the small things, how can we trust you with the big ones?" Claire's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of water, her gaze fixed on her plate. Her voice was quiet, almost too quiet. "I'm sorry, Victoria," she muttered, her face flushed with shame. "I'll do better next time." But Julian didn't look up. He just swirled his wine in his glass, watching her with those cold, unblinking eyes, as if she were nothing more than an object to be perfected. "You know, Claire," Julian said, finally speaking, his voice as dry as the air in the room, "it's about attention to detail. If you can't even manage something as simple as this." His words trailed off, but they didn't need to be finished. I could see Claire's entire world crumbling beneath the weight of his criticism. The air crackled. I could almost hear the clock ticking louder, each second stretching longer. My hands clenched around my fork, and I tried to keep the conversation light, to redirect it somewhere, anywhere, that wasn't centered on Claire. I talked about a recent case I'd won, hoping to shift the mood, but Victoria, of course, cut me off. "Women who work too much often lose touch with their true purpose, Evelyn," she said, her words dripping with venom. "Perhaps that's why Claire struggles." I bit my tongue so hard I almost tasted blood. "We didn't raise a servant," I said, my voice barely controlled. "We raised a strong, independent woman. Something your son needs to understand." Victoria just smiled. A cold, pitiless smile that made my stomach twist. She didn't hear me. She never had. As the conversation became more suffocating, I saw Claire's posture stiffen. She was struggling, I could see it. It was as if she was bracing herself for something more than just verbal barbs. Then it happened. A simple, tiny mistake. Just a drop of red wine, no larger than a coin, splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. Claire, her hand trembling, had reached for the bottle to refill Julian's glass, but it slipped. Everything stopped. The world held its breath for a heartbeat. Julian didn't get angry. No, that would have been too direct. He simply looked at the stain on the tablecloth, then at Claire, his eyes narrowing. And in that moment I saw it, the judgment, the contempt. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. "You're clumsy," he said, as though speaking to an inferior, his voice devoid of emotion. A silence settled, cold and suffocating, like the calm before a storm. "I'm so sorry," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. She reached for a cloth, desperate to fix what had happened. "I'll get it out. Club soda will." She never finished the sentence. Julian stood up with a fluid, practiced motion. He didn't hesitate. He didn't wind up. His backhand landed across Claire's cheek with a sickening crack, the sound reverberating throughout the room. The force of the blow knocked her out of her chair, sending her crashing onto the marble floor. I froze. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at my daughter crumpled on the floor, but it was long enough to process everything that had been happening around us. The violence, the control, the manipulation. I had missed it. I had missed it all. The signs were clear in hindsight, flashing neon lights in front of me, but I hadn't seen them. Then I heard it. A clap. Slow, deliberate. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a reaction to shock. It was planned. Victoria Thorne, sitting at the head of the table, was applauding, clapping, lightly, as though she had just witnessed a successful performance. "That is how she learns," Victoria said, her voice smooth, cold, triumphant. The freeze I was in shattered. I didn't scream. I didn't throw wine. I became something else. I became Flo Sterling Squire. I stood up, my body moving like it had a mind of its own, as my fingers slid into my clutch, pulling out my phone. My hands were steady as I hit the speed dial for Deputy Chief Harrison, a man whose career I had helped save years ago, and who owed me everything. "What are you doing?" Julian sneered, wiping his hand with a napkin as if nothing had happened. "I'm calling the police," I said, my voice cold calm. "You wouldn't dare," Victoria scoffed, taking a sip of her wine. "This is a family matter. Don't embarrass yourself, Evelyn." But I wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not after everything I'd seen. "This is Evelyn Sterling," I said into the phone, keeping my gaze fixed on Julian. "I require an immediate unit at 24 Broadway. Domestic violence in progress. The assailant is still on the premises. The victim is injured. I am a witness." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, and then the dispatcher's voice confirmed they were on their way. I didn't look away from Julian. He laughed, a dry, arrogant sound. "You think the police will touch me?" he sneered. "Do you know who I am? Do you know who my investors are?" "I know exactly who you are, Julian," I said, walking over to where Claire lay sobbing on the floor. Her body curled into itself like a fragile shell. "You're a felon. And I'm going to make sure you never see the outside of a prison cell again. If this story is touching your heart as much as it's been touching mine, please like and share this video. I'd also love to know where you're listening from. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The next few minutes would change everything. Stay tuned, because when the police arrive, nothing could have prepared us for what would unfold next. The sound of sirens grew louder as the police arrived at the mansion. But it wasn't just the flashing lights outside that signified the change. It was the shift in power. For the first time in what felt like forever, Julian wasn't in control. His smug facade faltered as the officers entered, their presence filling the room with a sense of justice I hadn't felt in years. I stepped aside as they took charge, led by Sergeant Martinez, a man I recognized from previous cases. Julian immediately tried to turn on the charm, the same practiced smile he always wore, but it fell flat. "Good evening, officers," Julian said smoothly, trying to explain away the situation. "My wife had a bit of a manic episode, Save it." One of the officers cut him off, stepping forward. "We've got reports of domestic violence. And the evidence in the room tells a very different story." The officers didn't even glance at Victoria, who was standing by the fireplace, glaring at me with barely contained fury. They focused on Julian, and when they handcuffed him, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected: fear. Not the cold, calculated fear he tried to hide for years, but a raw, genuine panic. He was no longer in control. They let him out of the house, his face twisted in disbelief, his eyes briefly locking with Claire's. For a second I saw him try to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead he muttered, "You're making a mistake, Claire. You know that, right?" I didn't wait to hear more. I turned to Claire, whose face was still pale, the bruise on her cheek a sickening shade of purple. I pulled her into my arms, trying to shield her from the weight of the world. Victoria, still standing at the fireplace, hissed under her breath, "You've declared war, Evelyn. You have no idea the forces you've just unleashed." I held Claire tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. "No, Victoria," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "I didn't declare war. I just protected my daughter. And you should know that's a battle I'll win every time." The officers took Julian away, but the war was far from over. It had only just begun. If you're still with me, don't forget to like, share, and let me know where you're tuning in from. We're not done yet, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Share your own story in the comments if you've ever been in a fight like this. We're stronger when we stand together. But the true cost of this battle would only reveal itself days later. And as the tension rose, we soon discovered that Julian's actions weren't his only weapon. He had a powerful ally, and the fight was about to get even more complicated. The days that followed were a blur of legal battles, public humiliation, and the slow, relentless unraveling of everything Julian had once held dear. His arrogance had been his downfall, but it wasn't over. Not yet. Within 48 hours, my firm received a formal complaint. Julian's lawyers, a team of sharks from a rival firm, had filed an emergency motion, claiming that Claire was mentally unstable and a danger to herself. They tried to invalidate her statement, spin her suffering into an excuse for Julian's violence. But the worst part wasn't just the legal fight. No, it was the isolation. San Francisco's elite are a small, tightly knit circle. Everyone knows everyone, and Victoria Thorne was still a force to be reckoned with, despite everything that had happened. She wielded her power with the precision of a surgeon, and within days rumors started to swirl. People who had once been Claire's friends whispered that she'd been drinking heavily, that she'd been self-harming, that she'd been the one to provoke Julian. The gaslighting campaign was in full swing and it was working. Some people bought into the lies. Some didn't. But Claire felt like she was suffocating in it all. 3 days after Julian was arrested, I found Claire at the kitchen island, her face pale, her hands clutching her phone like it might hold the answers she was desperately searching for. The bruise on her cheek had turned a sickly yellow, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "They're destroying me, Mom," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. She showed me a post on her phone from a mutual friend, someone who had been a bridesmaid at her wedding. It was a vague, almost cryptic message about standing by friends who are falsely accused, and the dangers of vindictive women. I could see it in Claire's eyes, the doubt, the self-blame. She thought maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. I took the phone away from her gently, turning it face down. "This is gaslighting," I said, my voice firm. "They want you to break, Claire. They want you to recant. Don't let them." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with pain. "Maybe I should," she said quietly. "Maybe I did provoke him." I spilled the wine. I knew how much he hated stains. I knew he was stressed about the IPO. I gripped her shoulders a little too hard. I didn't care. "Claire Sterling," I said, my voice trembling with all the rage and love I had for her. "Spilling wine is an accident. Hitting your wife is a crime. There is no universe, no reality, where you are responsible for his violence." She looked at me, her lips trembling as she tried to hold back the tears. "He hit you because he wanted to," I continued, my voice shaking with the fury that had been building in me for days. "Because he felt entitled to. Don't you ever forget that." But Claire wasn't ready to hear that yet. "I know he loves me," she said softly, almost as if she was trying to convince herself. He has a temper. His father was tough on him. That's how he learned to be. And that was it. That was the thread I needed to pull. His father. I spent the next week doing what I do best, investigating. I was relentless, digging through records, calling in favors from private investigators I had used for corporate espionage. I needed to know everything I could about Arthur Thorne, Julian's father. The official story was simple. Arthur had fallen off the penthouse terrace one night after a party. A tragic accident, they said. But I knew better. Wealthy men don't just fall off balconies without someone noticing. I tracked down anyone I could find who had worked for the Thornes 20 years ago. Most of them were dead or had moved away, but there was one name that stood out. Maria Gonzalez. She had been the live-in nurse for Arthur Thorne in his final months. Her statement in the police report had been brief, almost non-existent, but I had a feeling she knew something more. I found Maria in a small retirement community in Daly City. She was hesitant to speak at first, fear in her eyes when I mentioned the name Thorne. "Mrs. Thorne is a powerful woman," Maria said, clutching a rosary tightly in her hands. "She told me if I ever spoke about that night, she'd make sure my son lost his scholarship. My son's a doctor now. I can't risk his career." I looked at Maria, placing a photo of Claire on the table. "This is my daughter," I said softly. "She's living with the son of the woman you fear. If we don't stop them, he's going to kill her, just like they killed Arthur." It was a gamble, a wild, desperate accusation, but Maria's face crumbled. "I didn't push him," Maria whispered, her voice shaking. Not with my hands, but I drove him to it. That night he didn't fall. He was trying to get away from her. The words hung in the air, thick with the truth I had been searching for. He had a cane, Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He was frail. She was screaming at him, telling him he was weak, pathetic. He backed away from her, but the railing, it was loose. She knew it was loose. She'd fired the contractor who was supposed to fix it. My blood ran cold. She watched him lean back, Maria said, her voice cracking. She watched him fall. And she didn't call 911 for 20 minutes. She sat there, finishing her drink. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I wasn't done yet. I needed to know everything. Where was Julian? I asked, my voice steady despite the terror that was now building inside me. 10 years old, Maria replied, crossing herself, hiding behind the curtains. He saw everything. And when the police came, Victoria took him aside and told him exactly what to say. She told him his father was drunk, clumsy, and that they needed to be strong. Victoria had raised him to be a monster. If this story is making you think, feel, or remember something personal, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone and your voice matters. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that stand against injustice, and share your journey of standing your ground. I had the ammunition I needed, but the real battle was just beginning. And the forces I was up against weren't just in the courtroom, they were in my home, in my blood. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The days grew darker, but the fight didn't stop. Julian may have been behind bars, but I knew this war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Every move I made was being watched, and I could feel the tension building around us like a storm waiting to break. Julian was out on bail, paid for by Victoria, within an hour of his arrest. His lawyers were relentless, bombarding us with motions, filing every possible objection they could think of to delay the inevitable. But I wasn't backing down. No matter what Julian or his mother threw at me, I would stand tall. For Claire. For justice. But things were escalating. The restraining order I had fought so hard for was being violated. Subtle ways at first. Flowers delivered with no card. Cars parked down the street that would drive off as soon as we looked. The unsettling emails to Claire's work address from anonymous accounts. Messages like, "I forgive you, Claire," meant to worm their way into her fragile resolve. I could see it in her face. The stress. The fear. The overwhelming pressure. She wasn't sleeping. She was pacing through the hallways at night, too scared to close her eyes. It was as if the walls of our house were closing in, the shadows of the past creeping into every corner. One rainy Tuesday, as the sky poured down outside, Claire spoke the words that had been weighing on her heart for so long. "He's going to win, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Everyone believes him. His lawyers are saying I have a history of instability. They're twisting everything, even the fact that I went to therapy in college after Dad died. They're making my grief into madness." I felt the ground beneath me shift. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that we'd get through this. But deep down I wasn't so sure. I had seen the power Victoria wielded. How she could manipulate the truth. How she could twist everything to her advantage. But I refused to let her win. "No," I said firmly, holding her gaze. "They are desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." But the truth was, I was just as desperate as they were. The walls were closing in around me, and I could feel the pressure building. Every phone call, every email, every moment of silence from the other side. It all felt like a countdown. Then came the night that changed everything. It had been 3 weeks since that dinner, and I had stayed late at the office preparing the affidavit from Maria, the former nurse who had witnessed Arthur Thorne's fall. I left Claire at home with a security guard I had hired, a burly ex-cop named Miller. When I turned onto my street that evening, my heart dropped into my stomach. I saw the flashing police lights. The front door of our house was smashed open, and the house looked like a hurricane had passed through it. Furniture was overturned. Mirrors were shattered. And there, sitting on the steps, was Miller, bloodied, being tended to by paramedics. "Where is she?" I screamed, rushing towards him. Miller, his face pale and his hand pressed against his head, pointed toward the backyard. I didn't think. I just ran. I tore through the kitchen, stepping over broken glass, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me that something was wrong. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. And then I found them. Claire was cornered against the old oak tree in the backyard. The same tree Marcus had planted when we first moved into the house. The rain was pouring down, soaking everything in its path, but I couldn't think about that. Not now. Julian was standing there, soaked to the bone, his expensive suit ruined, his eyes wild and manic. He held a landscaping brick in his hand. "You're ruining everything," he screamed, his voice cracking, his words filled with desperation and rage. "We were perfect. We were the power couple. Why can't you just behave? Why do you have to listen to this witch?" Claire wasn't cowering. Not this time. She was standing, shaking, yes, but standing. "Because I'm not your property, Julian," she yelled back, her voice cutting through the storm like a beacon of defiance. "I am not an object you can polish and break whenever you feel like it." In that moment I felt a surge of pride for her. She had found her strength. She had found her voice. I stepped into the garden, my voice booming with the authority of a courtroom. "That is possession, and it is over." Julian whipped around to face me, his eyes flashing with hate. You poisoned her against me." He spat. "My mother was right. You are the cancer." He raised the brick in the air and time seemed to slow. But I didn't flinch. "Drop the brick, Julian," I said, my voice steady and cold. "The police are already here. Look around you." Red and blue lights bathed the garden, and officers were swarming the perimeter, guns drawn. Julian froze. For a split second his expression changed. I saw the boy he used to be. The scared little boy hiding behind the curtains. And then I saw the monster Victoria had created. His grip on the brick loosened, but it didn't fall in surrender. It dropped in disgust. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, trying to smooth his wet hair back, his face shifting into a mask of sanity. "My wife is hysterical. I was just trying to calm her down." But before he could say another word, Officer Martinez tackled him to the ground. The aftermath of that night broke the dam. The violation of the restraining order. The assault on Miller, the security guard. The attempted assault on Claire. It was too much for even Victoria's wealth and influence to bury. Julian was held without bail. But the real victory came 2 days later. I went to see Victoria. She was sitting in her drawing room sipping tea, pretending like her world wasn't collapsing around her. "Get out of my house," she spat without looking up. I placed a file on the table in front of her. It contained Maria's sworn affidavit, the maintenance records for the balcony railing from 20 years ago. The one Victoria had known was loose, and the recording of her applauding as her son beat my daughter. "You have 2 choices, Victoria," I said, my voice unwavering. 1. You liquidate Julian's assets to pay for a settlement that will ensure Claire never has to work again. Unless she chooses to. You step down from the charity boards and you plead no contest to the charges of obstruction of justice that the DA is filing against you this afternoon based on this evidence. Or 2, we go to trial and I put Maria on the stand. I will reopen the investigation into Arthur's death. I'll play the recording of you clapping for an abuser on every news station in the country. Victoria's hands, usually so steady, trembled as she looked at the file. She looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. "You are a vulgar woman," she spat. "And you." "I'm a mother," I interrupted, my voice steady. "And I will burn this world down to protect my daughter. This journey is just getting started." If you've been moved by this story, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're listening from. And if you've ever fought for someone you love, share your story. You're not alone and you're stronger than you think. But this wasn't the end. Julian's fate was sealed, but the real battle was still ahead. And soon we would find out just how far Victoria was willing to go to protect her son and her legacy. The days that followed were a whirlwind of press statements, legal motions, and silent threats, each more subtle and dangerous than the last. Victoria had retreated into the shadows, but she wasn't out of the game yet. I could feel her influence still lurking in every corner, trying to suffocate us from a distance. Claire and I were no longer just fighting for justice. We were fighting for our lives, for our future, and for our sanity. Julian had been locked away, but Victoria was still a force to be reckoned with. Every phone call I received, every email I opened, was a reminder of the war I had started. People I thought were friends began to distance themselves. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said I was using Claire's trauma for my own gain. Some said I was trying to destroy a good family. It was all a calculated smear campaign designed to isolate us. But I refused to let it work. One night, as I was reviewing case files at my desk, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Hello," I said, my voice wary but steady. "You think you've won, Evelyn?" It was Victoria's voice, cold and cutting. "You think you've destroyed us? You don't even know what's coming." I could hear the smile in her voice, the dangerous calm beneath the words. "Do you really think your victory will last? The people you're fighting for, your daughter, the police, they all have a price, Evelyn. I can make them forget you." My pulse quickened, but I steadied myself. "Victoria," I said, my voice sharp, cutting through the phone line. "You've already lost. I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore. You can't buy your way out of this one." There was a long pause. Then Victoria's voice came through again, this time softer, almost conspiratorial. "You don't understand, do you? You think this is just about your daughter. It's not. It's about power. It's about control. And I always win." The line went dead. I sat there, the silence hanging heavy in the room, as I processed what she had said. It wasn't just about Julian or about Claire, it was about something much bigger. Something I had only just begun to understand. And that was when I knew. The battle we were fighting wasn't just for Claire's freedom. It was for the truth. The truth about the Thorne family. And about the darkness they had been hiding for decades. If this story has made you reflect on your own strength, hit that like button and share your thoughts with me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of standing up against injustice. You're stronger than you realize, and together we can all fight for what's right. The worst was yet to come. But this time I wasn't alone. I had Claire. And together we would face whatever Victoria and her twisted legacy threw our way. The truth was coming. And when it did, it would shake everything to its core. The weeks that followed were filled with tension. But they were also marked by moments of defiance and resilience. I could feel the weight of the battle pressing on Claire. And at times it seemed like the world was collapsing around her. But I refused to let her break, and I refused to let Victoria win. Victoria had underestimated us. She thought she could use her wealth and influence to crush us. But what she didn't realize was that the love a mother has for her child, true fierce love, cannot be bought. It cannot be intimidated, manipulated, or silenced. And that's where she had made her fatal mistake. Claire had begun to fight back. The woman who had once hesitated, the woman who had been so consumed with fear and self-doubt, was starting to emerge from the ashes. I saw it in the way she held her head higher, in the way her hands no longer shook when she spoke. She wasn't just my daughter anymore. She was a force of nature. And I knew without a doubt that we were going to win this. But even as Claire regained her strength, we were not out of danger. Victoria's final move was fast approaching, and I could feel her presence like a shadow stalking us, waiting for the right moment to strike. It came one late evening, when the air was thick with the scent of rain and the tension of the weeks before. I was sitting at the kitchen table going over case files, when I heard the soft chime of my phone. It was a text message. "I think it's time we meet, Evelyn." It was from an unknown number. But I knew exactly who it was. Victoria. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. My hand hovered over the phone, but I didn't hesitate. I replied. "Where and when?" Seconds later the response came. "Tomorrow 2 p.m. The old library on Lombard. Come alone." I stared at the message, every instinct in me screaming to ignore it. But I couldn't. I knew this was it. This was the moment when everything would either fall apart or finally be put to rest. I didn't tell Claire. She would have protested, begged me to stay away. But I couldn't afford to show any fear, not now. Not when we were so close. I had to face Victoria head-on. This part of the story is about to take a huge turn. If you're enjoying this, please like, comment, and share your thoughts. Where do you think this is going? And if you've faced your own battles, I want to hear from you. You're not alone, together we rise. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of survival and strength. Tomorrow would change everything. I didn't know what Victoria had planned, but I knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. Neither of us were. But I would make sure, no matter what, that the last thing she heard was the sound of the truth crashing down on her. The following afternoon, I found myself standing at the entrance of the old library on Lombard Street, my heart pounding with a strange mixture of dread and determination. The library was quiet, eerily so, as if it had been waiting for this moment for decades. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light streaming through the tall windows, and the silence was thick, almost suffocating. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me, as if the very walls knew the battle I was about to face. I had come alone, just as Victoria had demanded, but every part of me screamed to turn back. Yet, I knew this was the only way. If we were going to end this, we had to do it face to face. Victoria Thorne was a force of nature, but I was no longer the woman I once was. I had fought too long and too hard to let her win now. I stepped inside the library, my shoes echoing on the old hardwood floors. It felt as though time had slowed, each step heavier than the last. I moved through the rows of dusty bookshelves until I reached the back, where Victoria stood, waiting. She was alone, dressed in her usual immaculate black dress, her silver hair cascading down her back in a perfect, controlled wave. She turned to face me as I approached, her eyes flashing with that icy, familiar malice. "Evelyn," she said, her voice as smooth as glass but sharp enough to cut through the tension. "I didn't think you'd actually show up. How brave of you." "I'm not here to play games, Victoria," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "I'm here to end this. Once and for all." Victoria's lips curved into a cold smile. "End it? Oh, Evelyn, don't you see? It's already ended. It's always been over. You just don't know it yet." She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving mine. There was a moment, just a flicker, where I almost believed her. I could see it in her eyes, the conviction that she would win no matter what. But I had already won. "I'm done with you," I said, my voice low but fierce. "And I'm done with your twisted version of control. You can't break my daughter anymore. And you can't break me." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? You really think you've won?" "I know I've won," I replied, my voice gaining strength with every word. "You've lost everything. Your son's in prison. Your power is slipping through your fingers. You thought you could destroy us, but you didn't realize that we've been strong all along. The truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how hard you try to bury it." Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment, and I saw it, the cracks in her armor, the faintest hint of doubt. "Do you really think the truth will set you free?" she asked, her voice suddenly cold, as if she was challenging me. "The truth is a weapon. It doesn't just destroy your enemies, Evelyn. It destroys everything. It destroys you too." "I've already accepted that," I said, my voice unwavering. "But you're wrong. The truth doesn't destroy. It heals. It gives us freedom. And you, Victoria, have spent your entire life trying to bury it." She stepped back, her expression hardening into something like fury. "You don't know anything about power, do you?" she spat. "You think that by bringing the truth to light you've won? What about the people who will never believe you? The ones who will always stand by me? Who will never see you as anything more than a woman who lost everything?" I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. "You're right, Victoria," I said, my voice quiet now but filled with finality. "There will always be those who refuse to see the truth. But we're not here for them. We're here for us. We're here for Claire. And for all the women who've been crushed under the weight of your lies. And as for you," I let the words hang in the air, as if I were savoring them before I finished. "You've already lost." Victoria's expression twisted with rage. But beneath it there was something else, something almost like fear. And I realized then that she had never truly understood what it meant to lose everything. She had spent her entire life in control. And now she was facing the one thing she couldn't manipulate. The truth. This is where everything changes. If you've been following this journey, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Tell me what you think is going to happen next. What do you think will be Victoria's last move? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and standing up for what's right. The final confrontation had arrived. But even in the face of victory, I knew that the real battle was never about the outcome. It was about finding the strength to stand, no matter how hard the world tried to knock you down. And now, as the dust settled, I would be the one to make sure the truth came out, no matter the cost. Victoria stood there, her eyes narrowed, the flicker of doubt slowly fading beneath the mask of anger she had perfected over the years. She didn't speak for a long moment, and in that silence I could feel the weight of the past, the years of manipulation, the years of control. She had thought she could silence me, control my every move, but in that instant, I saw something shift in her. The control she so carefully built was crumbling before her very eyes. Her jaw tightened and she finally spoke, her voice cold, dripping with venom. You think you've won, Evelyn? You really believe that exposing the truth will change anything? I don't think it. I know it, I said, my voice unwavering. The truth is out there now, Victoria. There's nothing you can do to hide it anymore. Victoria's eyes flashed with a dangerous glint, a last-ditch effort to regain her power. You think your little victory will stop the machine? You think this world cares about truth? Power is all that matters, Evelyn. Power will always win. I didn't flinch. I knew exactly what she meant. For years she had used her wealth, her influence, her name to control every aspect of her world. But now, with everything unraveling, she couldn't comprehend that power, when it's built on lies, could be so easily shattered. You're right, Victoria, I said, my voice steady but laced with a quiet finality. Power does matter. But real power, the kind that stands the test of time, is not about domination. It's about standing in the truth. It's about the people who refuse to stay silent. And no amount of money, no amount of influence can ever take that away. Her face twisted with frustration, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the raw panic creeping in. She wasn't used to losing. She wasn't used to being seen for what she was. And I knew that deep down it scared her. I could feel it now, the power had shifted. I turned and walked away from her, not because I feared her, but because I knew the real battle was over. Her empire had crumbled, and with it, so had the fear that had kept me captive for so long. I stepped into the sunlight outside, breathing in deeply, as if the very air tasted sweeter. The weight on my shoulders lifted and I felt lighter, freer than I had in years. Claire was waiting for me in the car, her face tired but proud. When I slid into the seat beside her, I couldn't help but smile. She looked at me, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and something deeper, strength. You did it, Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. We did it. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. The victory was sweet, but it was bittersweet too. We had won, yes, but the price had been high. I couldn't have done it without you, Claire, I said softly. You gave me the strength to keep going. You're not just my daughter anymore. You're my hero. She laughed softly, tears welling in her eyes. I'm just glad you're finally seeing yourself the way I see you. You've always been strong, Mom. You've always been my hero. If this part of the story made you feel like you were walking alongside us, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Tell me how this journey has impacted you. And if you've ever fought to reclaim your life, you're not alone and your story matters. And of course, subscribe for more stories of resilience, love, and strength. Even though the battle was over, I knew the fight for our future had just begun. The scars of this journey would never fully fade, but they would serve as a reminder of how far we had come, and how much power we truly held when we stood together. As we drove away from the library, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a gray, quiet sky. The tension that had clung to the air for so long felt like it was finally easing. Yet I knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. We had won this battle. But there were still the ripples to navigate, the aftermath of everything that had transpired, the scars we'd carry. I looked over at Claire and I saw it in her eyes, something I hadn't seen in so long. Peace. But even in that moment of peace, I couldn't shake the weight of the truth. Julian might be behind bars, but Victoria's influence was still felt everywhere. San Francisco, with its beautiful homes and pristine streets, had a darker undercurrent I was only beginning to comprehend. The world we had fought to break free from was still alive, and the damage it had done to Claire, how much it had twisted her perception of herself, wasn't something that could heal overnight. We drove in silence for a while. I wanted to tell Claire everything that had been going through my mind, but the words didn't come easily. How could I explain that, despite the victory, I still wasn't sure where we went from here? How could I tell her that the power, the wealth, the poison of the Thorne family wasn't gone? It was simply shifting, slipping into the cracks of the world we thought we understood. But then Claire spoke, breaking the silence. "Do you ever wonder, Mom," she said, her voice quiet but strong, "how many women are still out there hiding? Hiding from their own truth? How many are still trapped, too afraid to speak up?" Her words hit me hard right in the chest. Of course I had wondered that. How could I not? We had been so focused on bringing Julian down, on exposing Victoria's cruelty, that I hadn't thought about the other women, the countless women who didn't have the strength or the resources to fight back. I turned to her, my heart swelling with pride and pain. "I think about them every day," I said softly, my hand reaching out to squeeze hers. "But Claire, what we've done, this fight, this truth, it's for them too. For every woman who didn't have the chance to stand up. For every woman who didn't have a voice." She nodded, her eyes clear and determined. "Then let's make sure they have one. Let's make sure we don't stop here." And just like that I knew. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours to walk. Claire had always been my daughter, but today she had become my equal. Together we could change everything. The truth was, the world would always try to silence the voices of those who had the courage to speak out. But it was in those moments of silence, when the world holds its breath, that we find the strength to roar. And we weren't going to stop roaring. If this journey has resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your voice or for someone you love, please like and share this story. Leave a comment below and tell me how you found your strength. You're not alone in this fight. Together, we can make sure that no voice goes unheard. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of empowerment and standing your ground. As Claire and I began our next chapter, I knew the battle was far from over. But the truth we carried with us would protect us, guide us, and remind us of what we were truly capable of. The fight wasn't just for us. It was for everyone who needed the courage to speak their truth. And we were just getting started.